Hi guys. So I've been pushed by, not so much pushed, but encouraged over the last few months to, by various different people to do some videos on non-duality. So I'm doing this as much for, well, mainly for myself really. Sometimes when I'm in conversation, discussing topics along the lines of non-duality, especially if the other person has a differing viewpoint, sometimes I even forget what non-duality is, because it's not really a concept you can hold. Which then makes the discussion quite tricky. So I've noticed on YouTube and other platforms that there's quite a lot of information pertaining to non-dual teachings that seem to be coming from a standpoint of the audience knows quite a bit about non-duality already. They seem to take that kind of for granted. So I thought I'd like to do a video, my first video, on what non-duality is, what it is, which isn't easy because it can't be expressed in words. But just for people who may have heard the term in passing or might have read a book along those lines but don't really know a lot about it. So, non-duality, as the word suggests, means, non-dual means not two. So the reason it's referred to in those terms instead of oneness, which is also referred to a lot in non-duality, but the idea behind the non-dual is that you're pointing to something that isn't two or more really. Because you can't actually say what it is, it can sometimes be helpful to say what it isn't, so that is not two. So now I'll try and say what it is, even though it can't really be said. Right. So, from my understanding, non-duality points to what is always here. So, there's a lot of stuff, almost everything that occurs in our reality comes and goes. Thoughts, feelings, perceptions, those things really make up us as we commonly define ourselves. And so generally from moment to moment you're experiencing a different thought, a different feeling, slightly different perceptions. Everything is in constant motion and change and flux. So it's hard to define yourself really, because how do you define your body if, for example, the cells are constantly changing, dying and regrowing? Can you be a cell of your body when that cell dies? You might then say, well, that cell was part of me, but it wasn't really what made me me. What actually made me me is my ability to remember, my intellect. But again, if you look directly at any given memory, if for some reason you were to suffer amnesia and you couldn't remember that anymore, would you have lost who you are? Most people would agree that they would still be them. So we're not exclusively our thoughts, we're not exclusively our flesh, our body. All these things come and go even whilst we identify with this current form. Same for feelings and emotions, constantly in flux, constantly coming and going. So if we can't really find ourselves in these things, is there anything that is always here, that never comes and goes, that isn't part of this continuous flux? So if you would, seeming as non-duality is really about inquiry and looking for yourself, not taking anyone's word for granted, not needing any belief system, just purely looking for yourself. Take a look and observe your experience and see if you can find anything that is always the same. And just as a hint, it won't be a thing. So I'll give you a few seconds now, and I'll look for myself also. Best if you close your eyes. How did that go? Did you find anything that was not a thing but always there in your experience? What hopefully you might have seen, although you might not because we're so used to looking for something, is that what always is there is your awareness of all these things. So you're always aware of your thoughts coming and going. Although when you're lost in your thoughts, it may not appear you're aware, but by the very nature of you thinking, you are aware of your thoughts. You may not be aware that you're aware, but there is awareness there somewhere, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to recall it, you wouldn't know it happened. So there's always awareness, awareness of thoughts, awareness of feelings and sensations, and awareness of perception of that which goes on around you. So that's the one thing that always remains. And when you realise that all these things appear in awareness. So in that way, the only one thing that is continuous is awareness, and everything arises within it. So awareness is this oneness. There seems to be forms that appear within it that you could say, that's duality. There's this and there's that and there's contrast, and you can compare things. And this thought is different from that thought. And this moment you can refer back to the past moment and say this was different from that. But what always remains is this awareness of it all. And that's the only thing you really know, that you're aware. Everything appears in your awareness, so you can't really know the things that are outside of you. They appear in your awareness, in you awareness. You only really know awareness. That's all your experience of anything is the awareness of it, right? So everything that is appearing, you don't really know that that is you. not exclusively you anyway. You could assume that it's part of you because it's happening, but you can't know that you can't define yourself just as this body or just as this intellect, this mind, because it's just something, it's just an appearance in awareness, in what you are. So that's the whole thing about the term non-duality, is to see that because everything appears in awareness, which is unified, which you can't divide or separate, the one thing that is always there, the one thing that we almost never notice, and yet the thing that is continuously with us, moment by moment, never leaves us. You may not be knowingly aware, you may not know you are aware. You may think, if you became unconscious, if someone hit you over the head, that you weren't aware, for instance. But how would you know you aren't aware? You know, is it, I think as Rupert Spira puts it, is it the absence of awareness? When you're unconscious or in deep sleep? Or is it the awareness of absence? Is it simply that you're aware that nothing is occurring in that state? There's no thing that you're seeing because the brain isn't functioning. It's not letting perception flow. That doesn't mean that you, awareness, aren't there still. So that's my take on non-duality. It's a bit longer than I'd intended, and I hope it was clear. And of course, if you have any questions, I would try to answer them. But that's probably as close as I can get to something that can't be described in words, and you're constantly at risk of taking yourself further away when you try. But if you're lucky, the pointing to it, which isn't it, does give you enough of a hint that you look in the right direction. And you go beyond the words. Thank you for watching.